We are in Istanbul for the 5th International Conference of Housing arranged by Yapı Endüstri Merkezi. And also welcome to the architectural series titled Architects Talk or Conversations with Architects. Now I have a very distinguished guest with me, Charles Renfro, and thank you very much for joining us after the lecture. I know you are tired, but I mean it's a great opportunity to have you here so that we can maybe talk a little bit. Just before you, actually, we had an interview with Mr. Fuksas, and we were emphasizing the significant difference between the tradition of architectural offices in Europe and in States, or States and elsewhere, let me say, it's better to state it like that. Most of the office, he also mentioned it in his lecture that there are big firms, institutional firms, and like Arup, SOM, KPF, etc. And most of the projects are not based on research, but rather, I mean, they are producing a kind of a typology that is open to reproduction. As far as I know, you are not coming from that tradition. Is it true? I mean, can you, I mean, how much, let me say, feel yourself from America in that sense?
Right. Our practice is among a few, but certainly not unique in the United States. It's based more in a tradition of research, as you would find in a smaller European practice. When I joined, my partners Liz Diller and Rick Scofidio, 18 years ago, there were only 6 of us in the practice, and so
2004.
No, I joined in 1997,
but you became
and I became a partner in 2004. At that point, we were taking projects in succession, one at a time, and it allowed us the luxury of drilling down into each project and understanding the problem of the problem. And if it didn't have a problem, we would bring a problem to the table, which we still like to do with each of our projects. It's not about the client giving us a problem, it's about us giving the client a problem. And so I think that that's a methodology.
And it forms the basis of the research.
Correct. That's what is it that we're trying to solve? What is it we're trying to get at? And I think that's that is a methodology that is unusual in the States, but not unheard of, particularly in New York City. And in other college towns, in Boston and Chicago, where teachers are also practitioners and vice versa, so that the field of research is directly impacting the practice of architecture, and also the practice of architecture is able to find its way back into academia.
I think that is one of the basic significant difference between, not maybe different, but in Europe, I mean, most of the teachers in the field of architecture are already practicing, or vice versa. Those who are in practice have great connection, close connection with the architectural schools. It is true for some of the schools in States, and maybe that makes a significant difference in terms of that. And when I was making a kind of a search, I have seen that you were assigned as the National Academician in 1914. It was very interesting. I mean, what does this National Academician means? I think it's a very important title when I look around.
It's an honorific title. It's not. You don't do anything after you become an academician. And I believe that the title academician is a slightly leftover title from when the the academy was, well, it is still an academy. It's an academy where you go to learn and to teach, and it made you an academician. That started 150 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, it's not required that you be a teacher. It's not required that academia is part of your practice, but it sounds like that because the title is academician, national academician.
Doesn't it also refer to a kind of a validation that your work is very transparent to research and academia?
I mean, it's a very generous reading of the title, but it's not explicitly so. I think the people that have been inducted into the academy are at the top of their field in giving to their respective areas. So whether it's architecture or art or urban design or dance or writing, these people are contributing at the highest level to their field. Whether it's research-based is maybe not the issue, from what I can tell.
But you are still teaching at Columbia, as far as I know.
I teach
and
on...
And you are graduated, at least your master's is from Columbia.
That's correct. I teach on and off. I've taught at Columbia, I've taught at Rice University, I've taught at Parsons New School for Design. I've taught high school at the Friends Seminary, which was actually my favorite place to teach.
Why?
Because of fresh minds. They're just open and they're smart kids. These kids are from well-educated households, and it's a school of privilege in a certain sense, but it's not a selfish privilege. It's a service privilege. It's a privilege that wants to use its talents out in the world. That's what Friends Seminary does. And so the students there are curious and hungry and smart, and they have supportive teachers and parents. And I came and taught architecture to them for a whole year, 2 semesters. One semester having the students think about culture at large. What is it? So I did with them a joint condominium tower public museum. And so, and on the end of the High Line where the Whitney's now being made. And so the problem that I asked them to think about, knowing that they understand high culture of art collecting, their parents probably are artists or they collect art, but that also there's a socialist agenda here where I asked them to think about making a new kind of condominium building that could also be public in nature, so that the rooms could be open to the public, that artwork that's been collected by the owners could always be accessed by the public, even as the building is a private building. So I was trying to get at one of the problems of society, which is the privatization of all of our things. And these students had never really thought about architecture. They'd never really thought about the problem that was being built all around them. And yet they dove in, they solved it. They made so many ingenious things that my graduate students rarely do, because they're just they're just thinking fresh. They may be listening
this.
they're just very fresh. I've had great students in every place.
This issue of culture, I think, is significantly important in your work, because as far as I recognize, you are working in a multidisciplinary way, where, I mean, the art is the performance, the installation, and everything is an integrated part of architecture. At least you are pushing those disciplinary fields to be an integrated part. And in your office, I think there are people, not only architects and coming from other disciplines. So I mean, this defines a unique existence, I believe. There are a few other examples, but how do you evaluate this integration between this multidisciplinary thing? Because I mean, multidisciplinary is a very fashionable word in terms of, I mean, architects working with engineers, I mean, sustainability issues, etc., etc. We are familiar with that. But when you come to the other side, working with artists and performance etc. It's a different kind of a multidisciplinarity.
Yeah, sure. You know, I think Gore Vidal said it, that we've become pancake people as a culture. We used to be specialists, all of us. You know, we had expertise, and now, because of the internet, because of the ease of access of information, we have short attention spans for one thing, but we also have broadened our base of knowledge and interests. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that multidisciplinary as a concept is so fashionable now, because it explains, you know, non-photographers posting on Instagram and having 5 million followers, and so all of a sudden they're photographers, or people that write blog posts are now journalists, even if they were coming from some other place. So I think the internet has allowed the definition of interdisciplinary to broaden itself. I'm not sure that that's a good thing or a bad thing. You know, I actually really like...
It has two sides, I think.
Yes.
Two sides
Yeah, and one has to be careful and understand what one is saying. So, for instance, let's talk a little bit about, let's say, journalism. So, architectural journalism in the States that's professional and paid is dead. There are no new posts. You know what happened in the New York Times. While Michael Kimmelman is a wonderful journalist and an excellent cultural critic, he's not an architect, and he comes from outside the field. Not to say that he doesn't bring a valuable point.
There used to be architectural columns.
Yes, and so when the New York Times takes somebody from outside of architecture and puts them in the architectural criticism column, and all the other papers in the country, aside from the Dallas Morning News, have canceled and killed off their journalists, there is no professional journalism in the realm of architecture. This is one example of the way, you know, the kind of broadening of our culture has caused, I think, a kind of an absence, and I want journalists. I want people who are paid. I want them to have that discipline, that rigor, that in-depth research. And I actually don't think it's a good thing that citizen journalists are taking over.
Is it something which will happen to architecture sooner or later?
Good question. So one of the issues, you know, so Alfredo Brillenberg, who spoke at this conference earlier today, made the very stunning point, I think, that, and he makes this all the time, but it was the first time I'd heard it, that the favelas are actually the model of the future. These shanty towns, mostly in South America, but I think probably some around Istanbul as well,
that's true, yeah.
Somehow embody the future of our society and culture. And the reason that they embody the future of society and culture is because they allow for the owners to build on their own. Basically, writing the architect out of the equation. So I have mixed feelings about this, of course. He also made the point that the medieval city, as built over time and by the residents of the city, are the cities that we love the most. And I don't doubt that to a certain degree. However, when I look at a place like Venice, or even you know, Paris, pre-Haussmann or Haussmann Paris, whatever, these are cities we love. They're beautiful cities, and they're made by architects, and they're made in ways that there's a collectivized belief system, and that made these cities emerge as unities, as singularities.
But you don't believe in Corbusier's Paris?
No, I don't. No. But I'm saying there has to be a different. It can't be just one or the other. You know, throw it away, give the people land, let them, give them a pile of materials and let them go to town, versus you know, modernist monstrosities that happened all over Europe and America, bulldozed slums and government-made projects. Those are horrible too. They're terrible. So I think, you know, what is the new position? And I think architects must be part of this. And we have expertise. We need to bring expertise to the table. I don't believe I love my fellow citizens. I think they're great. But I don't think they are necessarily the best people to make a thriving city.
Are you referring to New York or all states?
Anywhere. I think we have, as architects, have expertise that we can bring to the situation. And when I think that there are certain movements that might say, let the people build what they want, I get a little nervous about the outcome.
As you referred, actually, you are working in an institutional firm which has been maybe there long before you have participated as a partner.
Sure.
and dealer and Scofidio. And then you became an integral part of this body. How does it to be a kind of a part of a, I mean, tripartite partnership? Because, I mean, for example, when we are talking with Mr. Fuchsas, I mean, he's the only one.
Right.
Of course he's not, but
yes.
I mean, he represents everything and
Sure.
not as powerful as tripartite partners and things like that. So it always, there is a kind of a dilemma between an institutional architectural body and a kind of a person-based office.
Sure. Well, I think you're illustrating one of the contemporary conditions of practice. And as starchitecture is maybe waning for its sort of singular vision and, you know, kind of look at me braggadocio, so too is the sole proprietor office. And I think the difference now is that instead of going into corporate mode, where there are multiple heads, there is a new model that's emerging that is allowing firms like ours and several peer firms in New York City to broaden laterally with leadership that is equal or almost equal, but with work that is developed project by project and not in a corporate manner. So research-based work. I think this is a fairly new model. It's not the Gordon Bunshaft SOM model of the corporate world that you're referring to when America started exporting its products as a typologically based, reproducible product. You have examples here in Istanbul of the Hilton, you know, and that was Gordon Bunshaft.
Yeah,
and I kind of like that era. Yes, but we have a different era now that allows for multiple heads to exist. It's difficult, but it's happening.
But still, do you feel a kind of a one-to-one representation between yourself and the institutional body of the office?
You know, we each work on all of the major projects together, but we each also have our own set of projects that we run. So there's the voice of all three partners in every project, but then there are projects that we individually take over. We just have too much work to have it be otherwise. And so for the work that we collectively have decided we each have, we are, you know, the kind of single voice to the client if need be. But we do try to maintain an institutional voice, if that makes sense. That where the problems that we're trying to work on through the research and through each of the projects that we take are collectively identified and agreed to in advance. And that we really try to make sure that what we put out represents the institution of Delursko Video and Renfro. And as you know, as you pointed out, the office has changed from a small art studio to, after I joined in '97, that's when we started making architecture. I'm not saying I brought that work, but the makeup of the partnership changed in such a way that it allowed for larger scale projects to happen. And so, you know, I brought a kind of a place to that studio that was almost missing before, in a way that, and so, you know, I feel like I have a voice now that's equal to my partners. We're about to expand our firm to bring in new partners even still. So it's challenging, it's interesting, and every new change in the organization will mean a change in the way that we make work.
When I look at the website, most of the projects that I have seen has either related to education, culture, or as you have mentioned at the beginning, if it's a standard project, you create a underlying problem or a kind of a concept that makes it unique. Isn't it so? I mean, so that gives a kind of a ground for making an alternative research or forcing the typologies, maybe. That's how many of the projects are coming out.
Yes. Well, as I said before, you know, we're a practice and we want to make sure that our practice stands for something, that we are contributing something to architecture and to culture. And so we aren't going to make a project just as a service architect. We aren't just going to, you know, give the client drawings of the walls and I mean, there are plenty of architects who can do that. Our practice is intentionally different. It's not to say that we wouldn't encourage other practices to be doing
what they do.
Well, right, but also to be investing more energy into thinking about what they're doing, because I think so much work in the States is done mindlessly, so it's important that every job we do, even if it seems like, you know, a kind of service-oriented job, such as making an academic building, is also positing something that we are interested in looking at, or that we think society could use would be useful for society to look at in a different way.
So can we say that you are designing in the way you teach, or you are teaching in the way you design?
Sure.
These are not two separate worlds for you.
Sure. No. It's all part of the same process. When we teach, we don't ever give a program. Neither Liz, Rick, nor I, when we teach, give a program at first. It's always an idea or another kind of problem. When I taught at Parsons, I taught the project that I showed today, the factory in China. When we first started working on that factory, I gave the class to my students. But how I gave it to them is I said, you need to design and make a handbag. And so they had to design and make a handbag by hand. And I was taking them to China. So I said, the handbag must be useful on your trip to China. And then when we go to China, you'll show the handbag to the owner of the company, and she will critique the handbag. And then when you're in China, you will take the place of one of the workers on the factory floor who is making the handbags, like you just made. So that was half the semester, was actually trying to understand what it meant to make this bag, what it meant to be a laborer, and to rethink the problem of the bag. There was nothing about architecture for half of the semester. But then we were able to get into the architectural project with, coming at it from a completely different point of view. What is it that's being made? Who am I working for? This is the worker in the factory.
Actually, earlier we were talking with Mr. Fuchsas a similar issue because he has lots of work in China,
Yes.
Starting with the airport. And my students are this semester working in Shenzhen area for an urban project. And there are two things that these countries like China or most of the emerging countries are seen either as a market or a very unique research field.
Yes.
So this is the dilemma, because most of the architects go there to produce something, to sell it, and it's a great opportunity for them.
Sure.
But on the other hand, it's a very unique situation, different than Europe, different than States. And so what you are underlining is the second part. I think this is very valuable because, I mean, day after day, it is becoming more similar to the other parts of the world, and there's no uniqueness in that sense. So, I mean, how do you see these cultural and geographical differences as you travel all around the world?
Well, it's a conundrum, isn't it? Mm-hmm. How can we be global architects and actually design and make for local conditions? It's impossible. A Western architect can't come in.
The only way, I think, I'm interrupting you, but the only way is trying to make them similar to us. I mean, if you take the short cut, then it is the easiest way, because I mean, most of the foreign offices, what they do is they reproduce what they are already reproducing in their table, because and the demand is like that.
Yeah, sure. There's no question. It depends on whether you believe in the global, a global kind of uniformity, or whether you believe in local
complexity, or
local conditions. And you see the backlash in the world around you, Russia, even here in Turkey, like nationalism and localism. Because people are afraid of losing their identity. I mean, in China, the hutongs have all been taken down. That's really tragic. Those are amazing places. Maybe they're medieval cities, the kinds of cities we really loved. So while we working globally, we are trying to do what we can to respond in a way that's unique to that place. And it's not to say that we're trying to recreate something that was pre-existing there, or tap into some historic zeitgeist or something, but rather to make something new now, 21st century, but that's completely unique. And so, for instance, Zaryadye Park, we just won a year ago now. We won a competition to do a park in Moscow, right next to Red Square and the Kremlin. It's the first time this piece of property will be turned over to the public. And what we brought that is something that we've done in the past is the Highline Park, this paving system, which is unregulated and lets people wander in various ways. We brought that concept to the park, but it's not about saying, well, I'm doing the same park as New York. It's completely different, but it is saying, I'm bringing an ideal about kind of freedom of movement, and that's a metaphor for sort of kind of personal freedom that Muscovites don't have, bringing that to this public space, and that's sort of the international thing. But the other ingredients of the park were Russia's own landscapes that we worked with local botanists and landscape architects to figure out how to bring in those local landscapes to make landscape which is uniquely Russian and uniquely from Moscow. It could be nowhere else, and in so doing, making a new kind of place that's neither old and of that historically of that place, nor is it we hope,
neither totally global, nor
yes, it's neither,
yeah,
but it's some kind of hybrid.
Reductionist local. Maybe.
Correct.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
What about Turkey? I mean, is this the first time you're coming to Turkey?
No, I've been to Turkey several times before. I spent one of my summer vacations here about 20 years ago. It was very different then. I was driving around the
Are we talking about Istanbul or?
Istanbul, a little bit, and also the main part of Turkey, the Asian part, driving around in Cappadocia and various other places, the coast. But Istanbul in particular, which is one of the world's greatest cities, of course. It's been around for thousands of years. It has all the layers of history, you know, pre-Christian, Christian, Muslim, contemporary. It's all here layered up. I mean, only Jerusalem is more layered. Even Rome can't claim that. And so I find the city amazing, fascinating. It feels like a real melting pot, more so now than it did when I was here 20 years ago. And yet it also feels more conservative in a lot of ways. And it's interesting. I haven't spent a lot of...
You referred to this neo-nationalist movement or something like that.
Yeah, I think when I came here...
Do you really feel it in the city, or do you hear it?
It's both. Of course, it's both. You know, you hear it on the news. You see what is happening politically, and it doesn't look like the democracy that you thought maybe it would want to be. It seems a little bit more autocratic. And then you walk the streets, and I feel like I see more women with religious garb on,
comparing with 20 years ago.
Compared with 20 years ago. You know, when I was here then, it felt like any other city. Now, going, you know, any other international global city, just I can make myself right at home, and yet the architecture was amazing, beautiful, thousands of years old. Getting back to your last question, it's not to say that that is a bad thing. You know, in fact, I think it does reflect a lot of people's desire to relocate their places, to make them of their, you know, of their culture and not of the international culture. And so perhaps when I see, you know, ladies with more covering on, I shouldn't look at that as going backwards in time, but simply to be more local. I don't know if that's the truth, but I'm just wondering with myself.
Yes, but most of the architects in Turkey now feel themselves as if they are forced to carry on a kind of artificial sense of nationalism. So if something, the identity or something is artificially set up, then there starts the problem. Otherwise, I mean, there's no problem, because if it really reflects the culture and the context, and it comes out of the source. But the problem starts when you start to build a kind of identity that is isolated from the reality. So we cannot, especially when the architecture is concerned, that is the problem now. Because when a kind of a national architecture is referred, what is understood is mostly copy-paste figures of past, which does not refer to a kind of a cultural issue that is sustainable. That is the significant question. Otherwise, I mean, the other way around, it is also an artificial engagement with the, let's say, mainstream. So as it is anywhere all around the world, too many images are circulating in the media, in the internet, and most of the young architects are influenced by them, and so they want to be like that and freed from any contextual givens or issues. So the architecture is reduced to a kind of a maybe image creating something like that. So it works. I mean, it's sometimes it works, sometimes, I mean, but when you have a critical look on this issue, I mean, you feel it, and it may become suddenly disturbing because it's neither that nor that this.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I just think there's a history lesson here, and that is, you know, and I don't want to be extreme, but, you know, Hitler and Speer, you know, and Germanness. And so
that's true, yeah.
There was modernity. It was bubbling up from Germany. That was you know, Russia and Germany, and there were a few places where it was really in France a little bit. And Hitler said, no, you know, this is not acceptable. We need to keep our culture. And there was forced. A lot of things were forced, but the architecture was forced into a kind of backward-looking German architecture.
Representing power and ideology.
Yes, so, and I think that's, you know, we have to be careful of something like that, where there's a false or ersatz tie into some fake history. You know, at other times there have also been references historically, and those have been the centerpieces of particular architecture movements. I mean, just think about the Renaissance. You know, this was not invented. The language of the Renaissance was not invented in the Renaissance. It was invented in Rome and Greece. So, and here, you know, so it's. I don't know, there's good lessons and bad lessons, let's just say.
That's true. I mean, but I don't know how much you had a chance to have a search on contemporary Turkish architecture, but do you feel a kind of a sustainable continuity with the contemporary scene of architecture within the city as you walk around? I mean, what do you feel in terms of contemporary examples?
Unfortunately, I haven't had enough time to walk around during this trip, so I can't speak about it. But my impression driving around some I've done today is that contemporary architecture is not really part of what I'm seeing. I'm seeing contemporary building. A lot of that, and the difference is, you know, building versus architecture. Architecture is thoughtful, and with a capital A is thoughtful and you know, considered, and, you know, maybe outrageous, but it's at least trying to do something. I do see around Istanbul all over the place.
That is a very good observation, actually.
Lots of glass towers, lots of new-looking things, But do they seem like they're thoughtful? Do they seem like they're contributing to the city? It doesn't appear
pretending
to be so.
To be something.
Yeah, they're you know, they're like, you know, peacocks, but, you know, without the barnyard.
That's actually true. I mean, that's the major criticism in Turkey towards contemporary practice, let me say. And the other issue is, of course, the sense of urbanity. I mean, the good buildings or good-looking buildings, when they come together, they don't accidentally, apparently, make a good-looking city or good urban life. It doesn't mean like that. There is a sense of urbanity, actually, in most of your work. Maybe, I don't know if it's true, but can we say that in that sense, High Line is a kind of a breaking point, because, I mean, your group mostly became popular in Turkey with that project. Maybe all around the world it's like that. Yes. But, I mean, once you get familiar with the work, and I get into, if you look at the other projects, you will see that, I mean, there's a sense of continuity of that idea of urbanity within different scales, of course. So, I mean, most of the, even the school buildings and cultural buildings, Center for Performing Art, I mean, they're always trying to integrate a sense of exterior space with the interior space in a meaningful way, so that I mean the building tends to become a part of the environment, or I mean reflects the environment. I don't know if whether these are to the point comments or not, but so I mean how do you see this? I mean, on the other hand, it's very difficult to be based in New York and to develop like that, because I mean the sense of urbanity is very rigid, so it brings a kind of a difficulty, an extra difficulty.
Well, we haven't really done an infill project in New York City until now. Now we're working on MoMA, which is an infill project, and that's sort of challenging for us in many respects. But I think your observation is correct. There's a sense of urban engagement that each of our projects has, even if it's not in a city. We try to make it be engage its environment in a way that is almost urban in
create
nature.
Its own urbanity.
Correct, exactly. So that the program in a domestic house, for instance, we're doing our first domestic houses, one in the Hamptons, and in those we split the program up into public programs and private programs, and sort of orchestrated the movement through the house and the collective spots in the house in a way that you might organize a public building. And so it is something that infuses all of our work, and something we're interested in. We like all of our projects to participate in the world. Every project you make is a civic project, whether you like it or not. It must be a good citizen.
Or you must find a civic part in the project. You inevitably must emphasize.
But if you can see the building, it's a civic project. If you make a building that can be seen by the public outside, it has a mandate to behave in ways that are engaging and positive. It has a mandate to be a civic project.
Are there any new and exciting projects forthcoming?
In our practice?
Yes.
Oh, of course there are. We are opening 8 buildings this year.
8 buildings.
Yes. 3 in California: the Broad Museum, the Stanford Art and History Building, the Berkeley Art Museum. The project in China, the factory is opening. The project in Rio de Janeiro is opening. We have a project at Columbia opening.
Business school.
The business school is down the road. The medical education building is opening. The tall one I showed one slide here. A house in the Hamptons is opening. So we have quite a bit of work opening in a range, from domestic to educational to institutional, from very small to very large. I think that the office is going to be redefined in a certain sense by what happens this next year.
How many people are working at the moment?
110.
110. What about MoMA?
It's happening.
It's happening?
Yes.
There were lots of discussions ongoing, I mean, even in Turkish media.
Yeah.
Because it's always not easy to be a part of something which is very powerful.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, it's an interesting give and take. The discussions are of the highest order that we have with the directors and the curators. There is, it's fertile territory. It makes for an interesting and sometimes challenging environment in which to make a great piece of architecture. But I think that because of that, there will be something absolutely unique as a result.
I think one of the problems, or I mean, one of the things that is accelerating the discussions is that you are not staying silent. You are trying to do something unique.
Yes.
That may even be competitive with the existing building or the environment. That may be the basic reason. Because I mean, if you had been preferred to stay silent and invisible, I mean, like maybe the annex of the Guggenheim or something like
Sure.
that, then it would be easier and
Yes.
less discussion. I don't know.
Yes.
But I think this is a kind of a preference,
Yeah.
consciously selected. Huh?
Well, I have to say, with the MoMA, we have identified what we think are issues with the way that the current building operates, and we're trying to to overcome those problems. And it's not that we're trying to do something that is overwhelming to the old building. Contrary to that, we're happy to play a background role. But what we do want to make sure we do is to make
without losing the identity. I mean, without losing the identity.
It's not really a formal proposition, but it's an institutional one. What we're trying to do with this project is make sure that we return MoMA to MoMA. Make sure that it actually is what the institution that it should be. Was that last expansion? Is it still MoMA after that expansion? We're asking the question. We don't know,
right,
and so. It's not about a formal proposition as much as a sort of institutional proposition.
I see, okay. Thank you very much. I mean,
Okay.
it was lots of... Is there anything you want to add or ask? And,
I mean, I'm curious to know, just maybe turning the tables a little bit, how what the mood towards contemporary architecture, or let's even call it smart architecture, kind of thoughtful architecture, is in this country, and how is the government receiving it, or what are the partnerships that are being forged between people that have contemporary practices that are questioning or pushing the envelope? How is that working in this country?
Actually, I mean, good or thoughtful architecture, let me say, architecture based upon research is highly dependent upon the client and the client quality.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think that there is any problem with the understanding or the theory of a thoughtful architecture and its integration with the contemporary architectural medium. However, I mean, there is not enough ground in terms of finding proper clients which will provide a kind of a basis for such experimental and research-based different architecture.
Right.
And government is the biggest, I mean, client in Turkey, as it is in many places, and it is highly, I mean, conservative in the sense that, as we have discussed earlier, they are trying to promote a kind of an artificial identity-based architecture, and which is not very easy to create a kind of a research-based design on that issue. On the other hand, I mean, the conservation of cities and buildings are a very significant and important issue, both in Istanbul, in many places in Turkey.
Yeah.
And I think we need more sensitivity on those issues, which is not publicly understood well. But I mean, there's a very good young generation coming now. I think things will go better. Let me hope, at least.
Well, one thing I would say, and this is probably the last point I'll make, is one of the reasons our practice has flourished is not because of the private world, but because of the public world, which is really surprising to me in a way. We've had such support from the government, mostly from the city of New York, under Michael Bloomberg. He basically funded the Lincoln Center renovation. That was our first major New York project. And then the High Line was the capital cost. A lot of it was covered by the city of New York. And it's because the mayor decided that he wanted to support great design and also great public space, both at the same time. Some would say for the rich and for the elite. But okay, it's open to the public. These things are open to the public. So it's a question of, are the the people feel comfortable going there. It's not for the rich. Anyway, that's another question. But surprisingly, the government was instrumental in helping ours and many small practices, shop and other burgeoning young practices, be able to become substantial voices in the culture world because of the city's support. Very, very surprising to everyone.
That's very important, I think. The mayor of Istanbul is an architect.
Oh, really?
I don't know, yeah, and he has a PhD on conservation, etc. And actually, it's a great chance that within his period, Istanbul could have some of the very unique architectural projects or examples. But I mean, unfortunately, yet we haven't seen as much as maybe we have to. I don't know. Maybe still we are optimistic.
Yeah, good. Well, I think it's. I just say that because I think our work as architects is so much at the level of policy as much as it is in design, and making sure that we're forging good public policy, and we often have to do that through our relationships with governmental agencies.
That's true.
So it's just, I think we do have work to do as architects.
Yes. Charles Renfro, thank you very much
for
participating us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was nice to have you here.
Great.